everyone, I'm Samurai Sam, and I'm continuing this series where I am looking at every single game I have in my collection, and today we are doing Sega Genesis, and this will most likely have to be two parts because I have a lot of Sega Genesis games, and there's a lot to say about some of them, a lot of my Sega Genesis games are in the box because Genesis boxes are easier to find than most other retro systems. So we're going to start with loose carts, and I'm probably going to get into some of the box games, but not all of them for this episode. So let's start. The first cartridge game, here's one to start with. Boogerman! Boogerman, very 90s game. It's a platformer, nothing too extraordinary gameplay-wise, but it's kind of amusing because of the gross humor and such. I played this when I was a kid a little bit. I think my cousins rented it or something. I don't know if they actually owned it. But it always kind of stuck out in my mind because there weren't a whole lot of games quite like that. And now I have it. We have Kadash. So one thing about old Genesis games is they often didn't have the name of the game right on the front label. You had to look at the top label to actually see the name of the game. So Kadash is an arcade game, but it's kind of unusual because it has a lot of RPG elements, and like you can pick, I think, different classes to play as, like Wizard or Warrior or whatever. And I think like the arcade version is better than this. I might just sell this version. I think I have the arcade version on a compilation somewhere, so I might not keep that one. We'll see. Championship Pro-Am is a remake of RC Pro-Am for the NES, which is a remote control car racing game from a top-down perspective. Pretty fun. I think the first RC Pro-Am lacked two-player, then I think the second one had it. And I don't know if this is a remake of the first one. I'm not sure if there's two-player in this one or not. I should find out. Comic Zone. This is a very cool game. One of the coolest styles of games. I mean, I'm not explaining it very well. So it's a beat 'em up, and the style of the game, which is you're going from like comic book panel to comic book panel, and it's super cool. The graphics are great, and like the presentation is just really cool. It's like one of the coolest games from this era, and the music's really good too. Gameplay-wise, it is also good, but a little bit unforgiving and difficult. But one that I definitely want to play all the way. I've played some of this game, made it not that far, and then just moved on to other things. But Comic Zone, definitely a very cool game. We have Crusaders of Senti, which is one of the rarities on the Genesis by Atlas. This is a kind of a Zelda-ish game, and you can recruit animal friends that give you different power-ups, and it's neat. The beginning starts out a little bit slow. I've started playing this game for a while, a couple times, and then kind of stopped. But I know it gets better, and I haven't played it all the way through, and I definitely want to do that. You've got Dashin' Desperados, which you can't really see on here. It's a bit of a cartoony game where you play as these cowboys, and you're trying to run to the end and beat the other one. Looks like it might be a cool two-player game. I haven't had the opportunity yet to play with somebody, though. You have Gadget Twins. Again, the label is really not showing you a very good preview of what the game is actually like. Gadget Twins is a shoot 'em up where one of those games where you fly and dodge bullets and shoot things, and usually one bullet kills you. This is the kind that you would call a cute 'em up, where the graphics are really cartoony and not realistic, as opposed to the normal spaceship in space kind of shooter. And it seems alright. I played it some with a friend. We've got Garfield Caught in the Act, which is a platformer. Does a good job with the Garfield license, like a cool little comic-y intro and such, and presentation's pretty good. Gameplay seems alright. I know it's nothing really all that spectacular, but if you like Garfield, you will like that game. So we have Joe Montana 2 Sports Talk Football. It's kind of out of order because I think I had the first one in the box, so we're actually getting to the second one first. So I guess I'll talk about that when we get to the box one. I don't need to talk about it twice. We've got Light Crusader, which is from Treasure, who was a very good developer for Sega back then. Light Crusader is an isometric game. I think it's a lot of going around dungeons and puzzle solving and such. A little bit Zelda-like, I think, but I haven't played this one a lot. I definitely want to. We've got Mega Turrican, which is a run-and-gun shooting sort of game, and I'm pretty sure instead of linear arcadey levels, it's more of more open and more levels that are conducive to exploring and looking at a bunch of different, going to a bunch of different ways. Instead of just going straight from start to finish. And it's a cool game. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I actually forget if this is the fighting game. I think this is the fighting game. There were a few different Power Rangers games back then. And I think this one's a fighter. I don't remember. I feel bad for not remembering. Mortal Kombat 2. There's a few different versions of Mortal Kombat 2 that we're going to get to that I have. So I'm not going to talk too much about that right now. I will talk about unique to the Genesis version. There are some cheat codes that are different, which is cool. And the coolest thing is that there's a exclusive finishing move where you literally transform the enemy into a weird, not cartoonish, but a weird looking head of one of the developers of the Genesis version, and it's called a Fergality. It's kind of funny. We've got Musha. This is one of the most highly touted shoot 'em ups on the Sega Genesis, which is saying something. And it's very well made. It's got great music and good gameplay. I've beaten it. I don't love it as much as a lot of people do, but I definitely appreciate how well made it is, and I can see why people do love it. And I am happy to own it. We have NBA Jam, one of the biggest arcade games of all time. It's an arcade basketball game, obviously. It's a 2-on-2 basketball game, and it's not terribly realistic. Like, there's no fouls. You can just shove people, and it's quick, fast-paced fun. Even people who don't like basketball sometimes like this game. And the Genesis version is considered a very good version, even though it's not arcade perfect. Definitely not. It's arguably better than the Super Nintendo version. The Super Nintendo version doesn't have music, which kind of sucks. Genesis version does. PGA Tour Golf. I don't remember exactly why I have this specific game, like how I got it exactly, but the Genesis was well known for sports games and pretty solid. I happen to like golf and golf games. I actually went golfing recently, and I did do that well. It's a very difficult sport to play. It's a little easier to play the video games. Ranger X has some of the best graphics on the Super Nintendo. This is a game that really uses the 6-button controller really well. Most Genesis controllers only have the 3 face buttons and a start button. This game really makes use of the controller that has the 3 extra buttons. And like you have, it's like a side scroller kind of, and you have like a bike on the ground that you can control separately while your robot character flies around and does other things. And it's a neat game. Rings of Power, I believe this is a game from the people who made like the Crash Bandicoot games later, but this is completely different. This is like an isometric kind of Western style RPG, I think, and I've hardly played it. Fun fact, there's a little cheat code in here that has some nudity in it, and I guess it kind of got past the censors. We have Risk. This is based on the board game, obviously, where you take control of different countries and try to take over the countries that other people have, basically. And it's mostly like random dice rolls. And I played some of the real-life board game Risk not that long ago, and I actually didn't like it all that much, but apparently this is a good version of it. So if you like Risk, you will like this one. Second Samurai. Now, if this game seems unfamiliar to you, then that's probably because this is only released in Europe. And that's why it says Mega Drive down there and not Genesis. I got this just recently, actually, and it is region-free. It will work perfectly on an American Genesis. And it's a side-scrolling action game. I think it was originally like on the Amiga or something, which was a lot bigger in Europe than here. And I'm looking forward to trying it out for an extended period sometime. Seems cool. We have Skitchin, which is a game where you're skateboarding and you're like skateboarding on a road with cars. And I'm forgetting exactly what the goal of the game is, but I think you can like grab onto cars and do like crazy stuff. Kind of extreme sportsy kind of, but I forget what the actual objective of Skitchin is, if it's to score points or to win a race or whatever, but it's kind of neat. We have Sports Talk Baseball, and I guess I can talk about this a little bit before I get to Sports Talk Football, but the Sports Talk games were some of the first games to have actual play-by-play announcing, and actually done pretty well considering the limitations of the hardware. Seems like actually a pretty solid baseball game. I would have really much enjoyed that when I was a kid. Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Crossroads of Time. I happen to really like Star Trek and Deep Space Nine particularly, and I don't watch a lot of TV, but Star Trek is an exception. I do like Star Trek. This seems to be a pretty solid game based on the show, and it's actually, instead of like a spaceship simulator or shoot 'em up or something, it's actually a platformer where you play as Commander Sisko, and it seems to be very faithful to the show, and I do look forward to trying that at some point. Steel Empire, which is one of the many quality shoot 'em ups on the Genesis. I can't say too much specific about this one. Actually, a friend of mine really encouraged me to get this one, so that's why I have it. Strider, this is a side-scrolling arcade game from Capcom with you have this really big sword. Like every time you swipe it, it hardly even looks like a sword. It looks like a big curve. And I've tried playing this some, and I don't like it too much. Like some people really, really like this game. and it's all right, but like not one of my favorite Genesis games or arcade games from that era. We have Sunset Riders. Now, Sunset Riders is an arcade game by Capcom, side-scrolling game where you're a cowboy and you shoot things with your gun and dodge things and slide around, and it's fun. And the Genesis and Super Nintendo versions are interesting. The Super Nintendo version is a much more faithful to the arcade. The Genesis version changes things up a lot. There's not as much content here, but the levels are actually different. It's not just a straight port, so there is reason to play this one anyway. There's also an advantage to the Genesis version because you can actually hold a certain button and stand in place and change the direction that you're shooting without moving your character. In the other versions, you can't do that. So there is a reason to play this other than the other ones, new levels, and that little control bonus. And the bonus stages are different, although not necessarily for the better. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Hyperstone Heist. This is kind of an alternate version of Turtles 4, Turtles in Time, with some of the same content, but some new content as well. The Turtles beat-em-ups are good quality games. Turtles in Time is better than this, but this is also good. Tiny Toon Adventures, Buster's Hidden Treasure. Solid platformer, even if you never watched the show, but if you watch the show, you would definitely like this one. I don't think there's too much to say about this one. It's a good platformer, and you will like it if you like the show. Arnold Palmer's Tournament Golf. Genesis really benefited early on from the sports games and the big names that they got to put on their sports games, like Arnold Palmer, for example. And so that was a big part of the early draw of the Genesis, were its quality sports titles, and that was one of them. Toy Story. Platformer, as you might expect, with really good graphics that represent the movie well. Toy Story was obviously a very groundbreaking movie with, at the time, cutting-edge graphics. And the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions of these games are both very good, at least as far as movie tie-ins. They're not like really, really great games or anything. I've heard the Genesis version is actually a little bit better. That's part of why I picked it up, also because it was just the one that was available. But as someone who really loves Toy Story, this is a good thing to have in the collection. Wonder Boy in Monster World. Now, the Wonder Boy games, it's a series of several games, and it started out on the Master System, I believe. And they're fun games. They're kind of RPG-ish, but they're also like side-scrolling, kind of dungeon explorers, kind of. I almost want to compare them to Metroid, but it's not so much that the whole game is one big level. Feels a little bit more segmented than that. But I guess you could also kind of compare it to Metroid, but not too much. Like, you never really earn too many big, crazy superpowers, but this is a fun game. I have beaten it. I recommend it. World of Illusion, starring Disney's Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. There were a lot of pretty good licensed platformers back then, and this was a good one as well. I haven't played a lot of it, but I do know that a lot of the Mickey games back then were very good. X-Men, good action game starring the X-Men. A lot of licensed games here I'm seeing. And this is kind of famous because there's one level where you literally have to press the reset button on your Genesis in order to progress. And yeah, again, if you like the license, you will like that game. Then the last cartridge game we have right here is Zoom. And this game actually isn't really that good, I don't think. Basically, you skate around a grid and try to fill in the grid. It's kind of Pac-Man-ish in that way. But literally every time you fill in a space, you hear this annoying voice go, "Come on, boy!" And it gets really obnoxious after a while. But it's kind of also amusing in its own way, so that's part of why I like to have it, is because, you know, if you want a game to laugh at, it's one to pull out. Now let's go over here and start looking at some box games. Genesis games had nice hard plastic boxes that stood the test of time well. We have Alicia Dragoon. Weren't too many games back then where you played as a female protagonist. Basically, it's a side-scroller action game, and you have magic spells and such, and I think, different like animal companions, I think, that give you different spells or whatever. And it's a cool game, and I should play it more. We have one of the launch Genesis games, in fact, the launch pack-in game, which is Altered Beast, which is a port of an arcade, I don't know if you'd call it a beat-em-up, that might be a way to say it, but basically it's like a side-scroller, and you punch things that are in your way, and like it's literally scrolling, like the stage slowly scrolls, and you want to collect these power-ups that are missable, and if you do manage to collect them all on one stage, you get to transform in a really cool monster, like beast or animal or something, and you have really strong powers for the rest of that level, and it is pretty fun. It's not, I wouldn't call it a classic, but it's a, enjoyable game. I can see people enjoying that back in 1989. By the way, the Genesis, as of this recording, just turned 30 years old in America just this past week. We have Animaniacs, which is a solid game based on the really great show from the 90s. I love Animaniacs. This game does the license pretty well. It's kind of, I wouldn't really call it Lost Vikings-ish, but it does have a thing where you have 3 different playable characters that you can freely swap between in order to progress and do things. And it's not like a great game per se, but pretty solid and a little bit different than the norm. There's some parts of it that were a little frustrating, but I have beaten it, and it is a quality game. We have Barney's Hide and Seek, which is obviously a very early kids game. Barney was that kid show that all kids loved up till age like 5, and then after that everybody loved to make fun of Barney nonstop. This game, you literally can't die. There's no challenge, really. It's just like a colorful and happy game for very young children. And the funny thing about this game is that if you put the controller down, then Barney will just start playing and beat the level by himself. No kidding, you can beat this game by not touching anything. I used to love to make fun of that game when I was like a teenager. Yeah, I had way too much fun doing that. Beyond Oasis, which is kind of a Zelda-ish game, although a little bit more action and less puzzles, but still some puzzles. And Beyond Oasis is a lot of fun. I have beaten this game, and it exceeded my expectations. You can get like these different spirits that will let you cast magic spells, and good game, just good solid gameplay all around, paced well. Highly recommended. Beyond Oasis. It's also available on the Sega Genesis collection on PS3 and 360, and some other compilations. I think more recent than that one also have it. Biohazard Battle is a shoot 'em up where I think your ships are kind of like a lot of the enemies are insects, and yeah, it's a shoot 'em up. It seems like a pretty solid one. There are so many shoot 'em ups on the Genesis. I got this one for cheap. Seems like a good game. Can't really say too much about it though. Okay, here's a weird one. If you live in America, it's Brian Lara Cricket. And I like baseball and I like sports games. And cricket is a sport similar to baseball, but also quite different, that they play a lot in other countries, including the UK. And but like nobody in America really plays cricket or pays attention to cricket. And this seemed like a pretty solid game to like experience the sport a little bit. And I haven't really done that much yet. It should be noted that this game does not work properly on an American Genesis, but I do have an analog Mega SG and a Retro Freak that both will run it just fine, so I am able to own this and play it if I want. We have Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday. This is, I believe, a port of a PC game, and I think it's kind of one of those, I don't know if it's an RTS or something along those lines. Yeah, I think it might be an RTS, but it has a very thick manual. Like holding the box, I can feel the weight of the manual in my hand. Seems like it might be a pretty solid game. I'll have to give it a try and see if it's my cup of tea. It might not be, but it might be. We'll see. Castlevania Bloodlines, the only Castlevania on the Genesis. One of only 2 Castlevanias Sega ever had on any of their consoles ever. And this is one of my favorite old school Castlevanias. It is really, really well done. Great graphics, great music, great gameplay. And you have 2 different characters to play as that are both a little bit different. And yeah, I mean, if you like Castlevania, you have to play this game. There's just no other way around that. We've got Chakan, the Forever Man, although actually that's not on the title. Yeah, it's on the back. This is a side-scrolling action game. I think there's some exploring to do in this one, and you're this dude, this bad-looking dude with a couple of swords, and it's kind of a dark, gritty kind of game, and it seems to be, it has a good reputation. I'm not sure if I would like it as much as a lot of people do, but yeah, I got it. It's not very expensive, so nice to have. Chicky Chicky Boys. This is an arcade game from Capcom. Shut up, phone. I forgot to shut the volume off while I'm recording. Whatever. Now you shouldn't bother me too much after that. So Chicky Chicky Boys is an arcade game where you're these cartoony guys. I think it's kind of a platformer. I forget. It's been a while since I booted this one up, but you can play as like 2 different characters, I think. And there's power-ups and stuff. It's an old cool, I guess you could say that. It's an old school arcadey kind of game and seems pretty cool. Truck Rock 2, Son of Chuck. This is a platformer and you play as a baby. I don't have the first Truck Rock. Apparently that's not a very good game. But you play as a baby, and I'm just kind of amused by playing as a baby with a huge club. It's not really anything exceptional as far as platformers go. I got this in a lot from a guy who's just getting rid of all his old games. So that's why I have it. Coach K college basketball. Basically, the reason why I have this is because I heard someone recommend it earlier this year, and then I was in a game store and it just happened to be there for cheap. So I'm like, yeah, why not? This is apparently like one of the best college basketball games, and that's cool. I like college basketball. I enjoy filling out the brackets every year, so glad to have that. Contra Hardcore. Now I have kind of a lot of thoughts on this game. Contra Hardcore really could have been the very best Contra ever, and it does a lot of really cool things, like different pathways you can go, and different characters with different abilities, and a slide move that makes you invulnerable while you're sliding, and all that stuff is really cool, and the soundtrack is so good. Main problem is that the trial and error difficulty is really annoying, and there's no easy mode, so if you're not good at this game, you're not really going to enjoy it very much. And even if you are good, you might get frustrated. The Japanese version was actually better because you had 3 HP instead of 1 HP, which is a big deal. And you also had an infinite continues. You can get that on the Contra Collection and also the Sega Genesis Mini. But I do really like Hardcore. It's just, I feel like it was a little bit of, I don't want to say wasted potential, but there was some potential there that wasn't fully tapped into. We've got Cosmic Spacehead, which is a weird game with a weird cartridge. And you are this dude, and I want to say this is kind of point and clicky, but also with some platformers. I haven't played it a lot, but this is a very odd game from Codemasters that kind of stands out. So you see some cartoony characters there. I haven't played it a lot. I'm saying that a lot. There's a lot of these I haven't really played. I have too big of a backlog. I really should deal with that. We've got Darwin 4081, which is a Japanese shoot 'em up. This is actually the only Japanese Genesis game I have at this time, although there's a second one coming in the mail, that being Langrisser 2. But Darwin 4081 is a shoot 'em up, and you can kind of like change your ship and evolve it, so to speak, in the middle of the game. And I think you have choices on how to do that or something. I figure since this is my only Japanese game, I should show you right now. Japanese cartridges look a little weird. Look, they have like a curved top, so like it's not flat. You can see there's like a curve there. It's different than the American carts. They won't fit in a regular American Genesis unless it's the Model 3, which was, I think, very late in Genesis lifespan. We have Desert Demolition. Again, this is one of these. I didn't mention this with Beyond Oasis, but late in the Genesis lifespan, they ditched the hard clamshell boxes in favor of these flimsy cardboard pieces of crap. And that's unfortunate because the cardboard ones were so much better than this. Well, I don't know why they changed it. But this is very good use of the great Looney Tunes license. It seems like a cool game. I haven't played it a lot. I'm saying that way too much. I should play some of these darn games. We've got Disney's Aladdin. This is, I believe, the best-selling Genesis game that did not feature Sonic the Hedgehog. The graphics are really good. They actually had like animators from the movie itself, I think, do the animation, so it looks very fluid and very much like the movie. And a lot of people prefer this to the Super Nintendo version. I think I prefer the Super Nintendo version personally. There were some parts of this game that I didn't like very much. Some parts that were a little bit, I felt either cheap or like, the bonus stage I just got kind of nauseated. It was kind of annoying. And I made it to the final boss. I didn't actually beat him. But, I mean, it is a good game. Like, if you like Aladdin, you'll like this game. But it's not, like, really anything too special in my opinion. What is special, though, is Dynamite Heady. This is a game from Treasure, a platformer. Very creative, very fun, very challenging. Lots of cool power-ups. Basically, you play as this dude, Heady, right here. And you don't have a neck. You just have a floating head. And you can shoot your head at enemies in various directions. And you can get different heads as power-ups that enhance your abilities. Well, not permanently. They're all temporary, but very, very, very creative, fun level design, boss battles, everything, great music. This game is just the real deal. Should be noted that the Japanese version was quite different than this. Like, it had a lot more story. Well, not way different. I mean, the basic gameplay is the same, but like the Japanese version actually had a story, and some of the things were tweaked in the U.S. release. The U.S. version is harder. But I don't think there's an official translation of the Japanese version. I think there's just the fan translation. But still, Dynamite Heady, I mean, such a great game. Highly recommend it. Earthworm Jim is a popular old game. And the Genesis version is often considered to be a very good version, at least compared to the Super Nintendo version. I think the Sega CD version would be preferable to this one, but kind of a cartoony, humorous, silly, but fun kind of side-scrolling action platformer. Now with Earthworm Jim 2, well, we're not at Earthworm Jim 2 yet. Actually, I've played more Earthworm Jim 2 than this one, so I can't really comment too much on this first Earthworm Jim game. But a lot of people really like this game. We have Echo the Dolphin, which is an unusual game where you play as a dolphin. And you go around the ocean, and I want to say it's like puzzle solving or something. Yeah, basically, I don't really like this game all that much. I think it's kind of neat to play as a dolphin and stuff. You have to like make sure you always have air, find pockets of air everywhere, and yeah, it's all right. I mean, I can see why people really like it, but I'm not a huge fan. And then Echo the Tides of Time, the sequel to Echo the Dolphin. I don't really have much to say about this one. I played this one less than the first one. Yeah, Echo the Dolphin. They're unique, but not really my thing. Eternal Champions was a 2D fighter. You probably want to have the 6-button controller for this. This is back in the era where everybody wanted to be Street Fighter, and this is no exception. And the Sega CD version is, well, we'll get to that eventually. This version is the more family-friendly version. It's kind of a colorful cast of characters, like superhero-ish types and supervillain-ish types. Seems like a pretty solid game. It's also dirt cheap. We've got Flashback, The Quest for Identity. This is one of those kind of cinematic-ish platformers, I guess you'd say. Kind of, it's in the same vein as Prince of Persia, if you know what that is. Basically, the controls are really stiff, if you know what that means. Basically, your character does not move as freely or fluently as, say, a Mario. You have to really, like, plan out your moves and be careful about how you move, and it can be really difficult to, like, fight and escape from enemies that way, but it's kind of meant to be that way. And it seems like it's a cool game, but I haven't played it a lot. I'm saying that so much. Same thing goes with General Chaos, as far as me not playing it a lot. This is a very colorful kind of, I don't know if you'd call this an RTS, but like basically you come in an army of like several guys and you fight. And it's unique, just kind of stands out in the Genesis library. Never really had a chance to play it with friends, and I should, because it's a good game. Has a high reputation. Ghostbusters. This is not the Ghostbusters that was on the NES. This is a side-scrolling action platformer, and you can like buy equipment and power-ups and stuff and shoot ghosts. And this is considered one of the better Ghostbusters games. Again, I haven't played it very much. Ghouls and Ghosts is the sequel to Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. There are arcade games which are infamous for their very high difficulty, but this one is definitely a lot better than Ghosts and Goblins on the NES. This is probably, if not the best Ghouls and Ghosts, or whatever you want to call the series. It's one of the best games in the series. Solid game, good music, good solid gameplay. It's just difficult. Be ready to die. We've got Granada. This is a game where you play as a tank, and you go around shooting things. It's kind of shoot 'em up-ish, but it's not like scrolling levels. It's more like you drive your tank around and shoot things, and there's bullets and stuff. And it seems like a solid game. Now we have one of the best named video games ever. This is Green Dog, the Beached Surfer Dude. And it's a platformer where you play as Green Dog, the Beached Surfer Dude. How about that? I haven't played it a lot. Again, geez, I need to play more Genesis, don't I? But it seems like a platformer worth a try, I guess we'll say. It's got that 90s attitude that I find a little bit endearing. Now, another one of the most highly touted Genesis games, we got Gunstar Heroes by Treasure. Good game, run and gun game, and it has like a variety of power-ups, and like when you start the game, you can choose which two you want, which is really cool, and adds some like replay value and such. I don't love it as much as some people love it, but it is a quality game, there's no denying that. And it's got some interesting levels and enemies and fights, and solid multiplayer game. There's one part in particular that where you like roll dice, and there's like a board around the borders of the screen, and what you do, what you fight and such, depends on where you land. And it can be a little bit tedious, I remember that level being, but it is a good game. Definitely one of the better Genesis games, and one that's probably even better if you have a friend who wants to play. We've got Hardball. I got this recently from someone for free, and it's a baseball game, and I think it's kind of non-traditional, I want to say. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Maybe I am remembering that wrong. But yeah, it's a baseball game. I like baseball, and Genesis was known for good sports games. I'm surprised that there's not more about this game online, like the Genesis, at least the console versions. I think like they were originally computer games or something. This is a unique game here called Haunting starring Poltergeist, where basically your goal is to haunt this family and scare them without getting caught or something like that. I actually went years without ever knowing about this game, and then I found out about it like a year ago or a year and a half ago or something, and I'm like, whoa, I need to have this game. This is really cool and unique. I can't think of anything else quite like this. But, again, I just haven't played it a lot yet, and I will. I want to. But, cool game. Haunting starring Poltergeist. And then the last game before I cut off this video is going to be Herzog Zwei. This is a kind of action strategy game, I want to say. Kind of where there's like, you're like the commander of an army, but you can also pilot a ship and fly around and actually do things instead of sit back in your chair and tell the units what to do. I think. Again, there's another one. Too many games today in this video that I just haven't really played enough. I mean, I know what they are and I know why I have them, but I just need to spend the time. But, you know, I'm still young, so I have time to get around to them. So I'm going to cut off the video there. It's been a half hour, 31 minutes actually, and there's still quite a few Genesis games to go, including the game starring you-know-who. And so, stay tuned. Genesis Part 2 is coming up next time.